I'd like to call the December 3rd meeting of the Moore Public Service Commission to order. We have one addition to the agenda, right, Bill?
We do, yes.
And the addition is, let me see here. I think we all got a copy. Oh, here we go. So it's item number 10 to approve an agreement with Ames Construction for the 115 kV transmission line relocation services.
Correct.
So
yep.
If anybody would be willing to make a motion to approve the agenda with the additional item, that'd be fantastic.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nice. How about the consent agenda? Anybody wants to remove anything? John? Nothing? Okay.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We approve the consent agenda. Do we have any customers to be heard? Any recognitions?
Nope.
Mr. Schwand?
Nope.
Nothing? Moving on to old business. John?
Yes. Bill, in the minutes here, we talked about the option of looking at a video for clarification on billing. Has that gone anywhere? Has anything been followed up on?
A video or audio? Or
I thought it was a video. I think council member suggested that we look at a video here. It was in the minutes, and I think the discussion was too, as far as an opportunity to get clarification on how to read the bill or something of that sort.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, we haven't developed anything yet, but definitely on the agenda.
Okay, can we keep that on the agenda then
Yep.
until that's been resolved here?
I think the idea was to take Mark Moreland's presentation basically and put it into a video thingy, right?
I think that's with the consensus. Also here, if you haven't had a chance to do anything, we talked about an advisory committee, if you will, for former commissioners. Have you pursued that, or where is that at this point?
For customer service?
No, for advisory, former commissioners. We talked about having, as far as a resource for the existing commissioners. If that, I think, would be possibly a quarterly basis or maybe semi-annual. Not sure what the thoughts are.
Well, just that we've talked about it, and you know, it's a good idea.
Yep. Okay. So if you could probably in January or something like that get a confirmation as far as when we can do that sort of thing.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. Also in the minutes here, we talked about the potential location here of having the meetings always at the City Hall. And my understanding, there was a potential conflict with us having our meetings held there all the time. Is that accurate, or can we not have the meetings held there all the time?
There used to be conflicts there. I haven't checked if there's any conflicts now.
Okay.
It's up to the commission on where they want to meet. Dave Anderson was interested in meeting out here and having every other meeting because the venue is nice. We're all around the table, and it was good for a planning meeting. My contention has always been the commission really wouldn't have to meet more than once a month. So we basically have the second meeting a month as our once a month meeting. And our first meeting of the month is a planning meeting because I can't get the commissioners to come to a Saturday strategic planning meeting. Nobody's schedule works for a Saturday. So we kind of do our planning meeting every month. We cancel a few of them, but we basically have our planning meetings on the first meeting of the month. So Dave always liked that. So every time I hear Dave talk about our meetings, he wants to keep it the way we've been doing it. But the commission can keep talking about that. We'll meet wherever you want to meet.
So let's find out whether there's a conflict in the first place, right? Yeah. Let's find out whether there's a conflict. If you want to, we do all meets at City Hall, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, I believe there's a request that we look into that, so we should at least follow up on it. Okay.
Ralph?
Yeah, please.
The only meeting that I know of that takes place on Tuesdays is Park Board.
Planning does.
In planning? Is that a Tuesday?
I think so.
But you just have to not be on there once a month, so as long as you're not on the same Tuesdays, so.
Let's find out.
It used to work where we were always there, and if you needed to sit around a round table, we have the seating that's down below. I would suggest, or I would, I guess, advocate that meetings be at City Hall. I was talking to Commissioner Ralph, and I always mispronounce your last name. So
do I.
And for example, if I were to try to get my son here, who is in a chair, it would be near impossible. Not impossible, but near impossible, and that would be extremely frustrating for me to the point where I would probably say some things angrily and kick my feet and say I'm just going to have to call, because there's a person shouldn't have to go through that many steps to get to a meeting. So I would, for that reason alone, not only that reason, but that should be enough.
Yep. Noted. Let's figure it out.
Yeah,
Please.
and I'll just add to that too, only because I actually had one citizen that contacted me within the last 24 hours, and that was one of the things that she said was that because I've mentioned to some of the folks who've contacted me for other things that, one of the things on the agenda was discussion of ways of improving customer service. And this person said, well, are you still having your meetings there? And they were very bothered by that. And I think it's the, I understand in some cases if you're having meetings with employees, but if it's a public meeting, they should be publicly accessible. And so it sends a good message that, you really do care about getting citizen input. And so having a place that is easily accessible, that people are familiar with, having it in a consistent location, all of those things are things that are really valuable for community engagement.
And Bill, and I appreciate you researching that this meeting location is compliant with accessibility here for it. But I think the request is a valid one for us to look at and just use that way.
We'll
Yeah,
pull it
okay.
together.
Yep.
Maybe we'll put an agenda item together so we can talk
Yep.
about it. Have the commission take some formal action, because whatever the commission wants to do with that, we'll do it.
Yeah, okay. And then I think we can probably just throw it in here. At the EDA meeting here yesterday, it was noted that the Attorney General has decided that if you're a charter city, you have to have it in a charter if you can have memberships. I believe I'm stating that correctly here for it. So the discussion came up as the chamber membership here. And yesterday, the city manager discussed an option that the EDA could then, since they're a separate entity, could be a member of the chamber. But we, as the Moorhead Public Service is considered a part of the city, we can not be a part of the city based on Attorney General, and the state auditor is confirming that. So I think it was in your minutes or your plan that we have different memberships here. So I think that's an item that we're going to have to discuss here as well, because it seems like from that meeting, there's not a lot of options. The Attorney General is saying no.
We did plan to talk about that at the 17th meeting,
All right.
December
Okay.
17th.
All right. Okay. That's-
And John has been doing some research on that very issue.
Yeah, and it is what it is, I guess, here for it. But being with the EDA here, that may be an option for us to collaborate with that as well. Just keep that in mind.
We will. And yeah, I think, and we're doing some research on that, so we'll come back to you. You might be surprised, our reading of the charter says that we believe that we can be a member of the chamber, so.
And I can appreciate that, but according to what the Attorney General is saying, that we are a part of the city, and the city cannot, because it's not part of the charter.
Right.
So anyway, let's
and
just
John
move on.
can-
Let's just move on. We don't need
Right.
to.
John can talk
discuss
about that at the next meeting.
Yeah, here for it. So that's all my old
Cool.
business.
Thanks, John. City Council, Heidi.
I don't have anything, sorry, I'm writing some notes here. I don't have anything off the top of my head that I can think of. Do you have anything, Ann?
Nothing that's not out of control.
Cool. Thanks. Members of the commission, anything new?
Oh, thank you.
Did anybody do any work? Sorry.
Didn't we just meet?
Yeah. We did.
Yeah.
That was a 12-hour meeting, right? Mr. General Manager, what do you got?
No, I'll pass as well.
Wow, this is amazing. So we have item number 8D, accept report on strategic direction for 2020 preliminary budget and financial forecast process. Who's going to talk to that?
Well, Nancy is going to, what, do you want me to do the intro? I can just, we've talked about our strategic plan and our strategic direction regarding the budget. We've got a number of items included in this one, which is basically directing us or taking a look at the city charter and what the city charter is saying. Dave Anderson actually was the one that wanted this kind of placed on the agenda after the commission or after the council requested us to present the budget. So we've got some charter language in there. We talk a little bit about the budget in there. We talk about, the requests that have come from the council, and so we just wanted to kind of get it on the schedule to see if the commission wanted a little bit more of an education about what the charter says about more in public service. So I don't know if you want to wait, because Dave's the one who requested it. Dave's not here tonight. I don't know if you
move it to the 17th, maybe.
Well, it's up to you, or if you wanted to talk about this at all as far as our, budget process and financial forecast process. We could talk about that, or we could wait until the 17th when Dave was here, because Dave basically had, he did the presentation in front of the council and did a very good job, kind of outlined the whole process, and we were actually looking at maybe, watching that video, because that was a good presentation. I'm not sure, maybe that may be not necessary because maybe you've watched it, but.
Yeah, I watched it. It was interesting that the video and the minutes that came out were a little bit different. But maybe we should table it for when Dave is back on the 17th. But what's the pleasure of the commission?
I agree, yeah.
Should we table it? So, would anybody like to so move?
I'll make that. Yep. I'll move that the item be tabled until December 17th for further discussion with Commissioner Anderson.
You have a second?
Second?
And I think there's no discussion on that, right? So all in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we'll table item number 8D. Item number 8E, accept report on strategic direction for customer service.
Yeah, so this was the main strategic direction item. We try and keep it to one. Dave wanted that other one on here. So basically, this is the big planning item. We actually added an item for action later as well. We'll talk about that later. But the Nancy's going to kind of do the lead on the strategic direction for customer service. And I don't know if you're going to talk about the difference between customer service and collections, because we kind of look at it differently. But I'll maybe let Nancy start with that one.
I'll start, and this is strategic planning, so feel free to jump in and with some ideas or some suggestions on the information I'm going through. Some of the information I put together in this report is from American Public Power's customer service survey and report, so I've used them as the basis for some of this information as we walk through customer service and what it means to MPS. So their definition of customer service is the timely and effective provision of people, processes, and information that allows utility customers to make optimal use of their electric service, in our case, water service also. I just want to kind of start with saying that MPS is a service-oriented business, and that is what we do. We provide the services of electric and water. All of our employees are customer service-oriented. They know that the goal is keeping the safe drinking water out there, keeping the water to the homes, providing electric service, and having high reliability for that electric service. So they're all part of that team. So we have, examples of some of the departments would be the line crew, where they're out in any kind of weather that there is. They're restoring services. They've got, 99.99% reliability. So services on for the most part. And there's linemen involved in that and a lot of other employees that support that process too. They keep the system, when there aren't outages, they're keeping that system maintained. We've got aggressive schedules for replacements of capital items and things like that. So we keep on task on getting the replacements done on a regular schedule so that we maintain that high reliability on the electric side. On the water side, we have, customer service people in the water plant that are responsible for providing safe drinking water. They do that 24/7. They're always there. They're always providing water. We've got distribution crews that are out installing water mains, repairing water mains, replacing water mains, and they're out in whatever kind of weather there is. So if it's 30 below, they're out in the trench getting that water service back on. So those are some examples of the types of customer service that we provide on a daily basis. The other area of customer service that's had a little bit more attention lately is customer service on the admin staff. So it would be our billing, our collecting, and what we go through with that process. We wanted to touch base on that just a little bit. First of all, I wanted to give you kind of a background on that group of our customer service people, who they are and what they do. So we have a staff of 2 meter readers. We have a staff of 6 customer account specialists and cashiers that provide most of the frontline customer service for billing and collecting. Over the last 10 years, we've seen an 18% increase in customer base. A good majority of that, or probably the majority of that, being in apartment dwellers. And apartment rental units do require more customer service. They're more mobile. So as we've seen the increase in the apartment population, it does put more requirements on our customer service staff to provide more services to that group. So we've seen that growth. We haven't added customer service staff, and we've done that by being very efficient and using technology to automate some processes, offer online customer service capabilities and things too. So we think we've done a good job of maintaining staffing levels where they've been for the last 10 years with that group and not having to expand that, but still providing excellent customer service with that group. I just wanted to go through an example of the amount of, actually I don't have calls on here, so I don't have the calls we take, but the amount of the monthly volume of work that this group of employees puts out. So we read over 34,000 meters a month. Most of those are now automated. It still takes a drive around to collect those readings. We process and mail over 20,000 utility bills every month, and less than 10% of those are enrolled in our e-bill. So as Commissioner Meinert-Mellon says, we'll continue to work on that and try to increase that number, save some mailing costs. Each month we deal with approximately 3,500 customers who are delinquent, so about 17% of accounts. And we also have about 560 move-in and move-outs each month that we deal with too. So again, a very mobile population. So of our 20,000 customer base, probably about 5,500 to 5,700 of those are apartment units, and the churn or the move-in, move-out on that is a high volume of activity, as could be expected with a college town with a couple of colleges or universities here. Very heavy in both the spring and the fall as far as move-ins, move-outs. Other things we do, we have on average probably about 200 accounts that the last step in the collection process is disconnection. So that's the last step we take, and we have about 200 accounts that we disconnect on a monthly basis. However,
Nancy, of the 3,500 delinquent accounts, do we have any idea which ones are homes or how many are homes and how many are apartments?
I want to say probably about 85% are probably apartment units. I'd have to check that number though. I'm not positive.
And then of the 200 delinquent disconnection service orders, do you know the breakdown in that?
It'd remain
Similar?
About the same, I
Okay.
think. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. You know, we have seen some changes in that since earlier this spring in dealing with some issues with some of our service assistance agencies. We made some changes in our processes, and so for a while we'd seen that dip down to, so disconnections had dropped down to about 0.5%. For several months we're starting to see that now rebound a little bit, but for a while our disconnections had tapered off for a while, and now they'll probably stabilize again. Other types of service orders that we handle would be streetlight repairs, doing assistance to plumbers and electricians as they're out there working in customers' home, providing electric crews and water crews to support those things, tree trimming, checking services, just a whole list of service orders that our both of our electric and water crews do on a monthly basis. Those total up to about 250 service calls each month. So in a nutshell, that group of 6 to 8 people go through a lot of activity on a monthly basis, and they do a good job of putting out that 20,000 bills and collecting from most of those customers on a timely basis. Some of the other demographics I wanted to bring in was just a look again, as Heidi had mentioned, what's that breakdown on our customer base. So we have about 17,000 residential accounts, of about 5,500 of those are apartment units. 2,100 commercial accounts, 389 others. And then one of the numbers we've talked about before is the average MPS bill. So we've gone through some of that information in our budget process. And just a reminder here that the average monthly apartment unit bill, this would be 2018 numbers, the average bill was about $105. 50 of it was for electric service, and 55 of that bill was for city fees. So that's the apartment dweller. And the average monthly residential homeowner bill averaged about $200, and about 2/3 of that, or $133, was electric and water service, and then the remaining 67 is city fees on that one. So a reminder, we've been through that information a couple different times. And again, educating the customers too, that when they talk about that bill, it's more than just the electric and water, that there are other city fees on that bill as well. So it kind of gets thrown under Moorhead Public Service totally, but we are providing those billing services for the city also. Moorhead electric rates are very competitive. We compare well against Excel and Cass County Electric, which would be the 2 competing providers in this area. Water rates are competitive. We know that we've got huge capital infrastructure programs there, and we try to keep those increases on water at a reasonable rate so we can remain competitive on water rates. Then I wanted to start through, or any questions? Maybe I'll stop there and see if there's any questions yet. Okay. Some of the billing options. So we wanted to go through some of the things, the options that are out there on how to pay bills and things like that. The highest majority of our customers are still paying by cash or check. They're either coming in, walking into the office and making a payment, or mailing a check into us. The second highest percentage is automatic payment, where MPS, they sign up, MPS is generating the banking transactions that go to their bank and pulls money directly out of their checking or savings account. At 26%, we think that's a pretty good saturation for that program. It would also be the program that we would encourage our customers to use. It's the least cost, which keeps rates down for everybody, and you don't need to think about it. We know it's not for everyone, because not everyone manages their checking account perfectly, so you've got to make sure you've got enough money on your account on the right date. But that would be our preferred, payment plan option that we would move people to.
So, Nancy, on a date issue, I know we have had some issues with moving dates. Are we going to fix that with the new software? My bill is not always due on the 1st, maybe the 3rd or the 31st, whatever it is.
We have talked about that, and we haven't actually made those stationary. We could look at it. The system is capable of doing it. We would have to figure out, how are we going to deal with weekends, because, if your bill's due on the 5th and it falls on the weekend, then what do we do?
Yep.
And we do cycle bills, so we have groups of customers. There are 9 different due dates, but, we can continue to look at it.
I would propose we look at that. I mean, just make it 15th or 1st or whatever it is. I mean, I do it on my credit card all the time. I know what my due date is, and if it moves to Monday, it moves to Monday. Or I have to pay on Friday, but at least I have a gap that's pretty much the same.
Of when to expect that.
Please.
If I could just add to that too, that is one of the other things that I'm trying to say that I frequently hear from citizens for complaints, that it's confusing, and then and then as a result, they end up falling behind. And so I think just that alone could make a big difference.
Yeah, let's look into that. I think it's just, and I see it myself. I mean, you never know when it's going to hit. So,
Okay, we can take a look at that again and see, try to fix some dates that are maybe going to work for the customers. Yeah, on an ongoing basis. Customer portal, credit and debit card, and e-check payments. So that payment option is available online and by voice 24/7. 16% of our customers are participating in that. Right now, the fee structure on that is that, as in many of our fees, they are cost of service based, and so that $2.95 fee that the customer pays is because they're choosing that payment option. So we've at this point assigned that cost to the customers using that cost. It's up for discussion. We've got some information we've sent out to the city, and we've emailed back and forth a couple times, and are looking at whether we should participate together in absorbing those fees. So we'll continue to work on that.
so what's the reason for the $300 cap?
The $300 cap is put on by our credit card provider. It's per transaction. We could go up to $400, but the fee would go up to $395. So we selected the $300 cap because it fits, like, over 90% of our customers fall into that $300 bracket. So most cost effective for the customers at $300.
Thanks.
Does the customer know that there's a $300 cap?
Yes, when they go online,
It says.
yes, it'll
Okay.
be. Yep, they'll be told that. Yes, and the customer is also informed of the $295 when they're making that payment online also.
Just to clarify then, so does that mean, so say somebody has a $1,200 fee or bill that they need to pay, and they're doing it online, they have to do 4 different transactions. They can't even just pay it all once. They have to do it 4 separate times.
They have to do 4 separate transactions.
And each time
yes.
they have to pay.
Yep.
Right.
And this program is probably geared towards that residential customer, and we hope we don't have too many residential customers with $1,200 payments, but it's definitely
But
not geared
business
to the
customers,
commercial
yeah.
customer that has that larger bill.
And are we looking at, in those cases, what would there be for an alternative for a business owner that wants to pay a $1,200 bill or a larger bill?
First of all, we would encourage the auto pay, where they don't have to lift a finger to pay it. Sign up for auto pay. Let us pay it out of your bank account on the due date every month. You still get your bill. We tell you what day it's coming out. We would encourage auto pay as a solution for that.
Okay.
Another payment option, we get about 9% of our customers using their bank's own auto pay system or bill pay, whatever the bank is calling that. So normally the customers are aware if their bank is charging fees for that or not. So I don't have their fee schedules. I think a lot of them are doing that for free right now for customers. One other option on bill pay is to equalize your bills. So we have about 500 customers that are signed up for equalized billing, which takes the highs and lows out of your bill on an annual basis. So it's an equal amount over 12 months. We do a true up at the end of the 12 months and then establish a new balance going forward. And then moving on to, some of the customer issues, some of the things that we hear, from those customers using the debit card or the e-check or the credit card, they're wanting us to eliminate the $2.95 fee. Again, we so far have kept with that fee because it assigns the cost of that transaction to the customer instead of spreading it over the total customer base. But we're looking at it. We'll look at it. And then the other question was already kind of answered, that $300 maximum, to increase that. But if we increase that for the people with the higher bills, the people with the lower bills are going to pay an extra $1 as we increase that fee also. So the greater majority of the people making the payments are going to benefit with the $295 for the $300 payment. And about 55% of American public power utilities are absorbing the credit card fees, so we're just on the edge, so I think the credit cards are gaining popularity, but I think the utility industry has been one of the slower ones to adopt those payments and absorb those fees.
And you say in here that the fees to us and the city are $57,000
About
from the credit card companies to us.
Yep. Based on the current usage, what normally happens when you start absorbing fees is people switch over to that because they'll get their airline miles or whatever. So I think our credit card processor says that you could probably plan on about a 10 to 15% increase in usage if the fees are absorbed. So that number would go up slightly, but that would just depend on experiences here.
I guess that was my question. Related to that is that if we have people who aren't paying, so to end up not paying their bill for some reason, because, and if it's tied in with that, if we do things to make it easier, would we offset the added cost of absorbing that by the revenue that we would bring in by people paying? I was wondering if they've looked at that in other places to see if, it's offset to some degree because people are less likely to be delinquent. They're more likely to pay because we've made it easier, and therefore, even though we're paying this, but we're making it up in other areas.
Good question. We haven't investigated that to see. That one might take a little bit of data analysis to try to figure that one out. Yeah. Good point, though.
My commentary from my experience, if they aren't paying their utility, their credit card bill, our credit card isn't available to them. It just, that's the fact of the world.
Yeah,
Therefore, so a couple comments here. Nancy, just to confirm again here, and I firmly believe investing in training because we all can use improvements here. But again, we're billing 20,000 customers a month. And it seems to me from the reading that I've seen here that there's been a lot of commentary recently about the poor quality of customer service that the utility is giving. And I don't know what the experience is at the council level of collections or working in the collection industry and how many times they may have been threatened physically by people because they can't pay their bill or they don't want to pay their bill. So when you are looking here at a handful of isolated comments about how immoral the utility is and how they should be more easy on customers, I think we're not really giving credit to the staff we have. And I would encourage a little bit more support, and if they would like to have the experience to go doing collection work, I'm sure they would have a very enlightening experience sitting with those people at the desk when they're having people scream at them, threaten them, and it's their fault because the bill isn't paid. So when we are looking at the information, we need to look at both sides of the information versus an email or something on Twitter account or any of that sort of thing, because it's easy to make complaints when there's no name attached. And it's interesting, the citing that we've seen, the people are past due, they say they don't get notices, and it's the utility's fault. I find that very interesting in the commentary that is being criticized by the customer service.
I'd like to just say one thing, John, to that. I don't know how much collection work our front-end staff do, but I can tell you that we are not, we are not protected, we're not shielded from threats. We receive a lot of threats, council members, city staff, frequently about things like assessments and property taxes that have nothing to do with the city, that are county taxes, school taxes. So, I know what you're saying, but please don't make the assumption that our staff are somehow protected and don't get threatened, because they receive their fair of threats too.
My point is that we need to support our staff in those positions, because if you've been threatened, I've been threatened. It's not a very comfortable situation,
no, it's not.
And they need support versus being criticized in public about the job they're doing and how they're doing their job.
Yeah. Thank you. I think tied to that, because I've really been thinking a lot about this, of, why is it that, I'll be quite honest, that, I have heard more complaints about MPS things more publicly than I have for other departments of the city, And when we have things like people on Facebook that are saying, horrible things about MPS, or when I have business developers or business owners contacting me, So I can't deny that it happens, but I don't necessarily think that it is, I think some of it is how we deal with things when there is a problem and what processes are there. And so, because honestly, I've had great experience, and I hear lots of positive things. And it's, to me, some of it is maybe we are, as a commission too, not looking at this broadly enough of how do we respond when there is an issue. Why is it that people, when there is a problem, that they're turning to Facebook rather than, having a good place where they can get their questions answered? And it made me think, so John and I were in an EDA meeting yesterday, and we were talking about, in the past, some of the issues that the city has had where we rightly were criticized as not being that great with communicating with businesses and things like that. So this was our Economic Development Association. And how, in this case, there was one particular business now that they were having an issue, okay? And we don't need to say which business it was, but a nice new business in Moorhead. They were having a problem with some of the things to get up and running. And in this case, something that originally it started to escalate into, like, we've got this problem, and then they started talking to other people. But luckily, is that the message got to somebody at the city, and they were very quickly able to answer it, and it ended up just being a mistake. It wasn't that it was a misinterpretation of something, and they were able to resolve it kind of quickly. And so, so I was trying to think about that, is that, what could we be doing better so that people feel like they are being heard, that they feel like we're responding to them. So I don't necessarily think it's like at the customer service level. I think there maybe would be some things we can do, but again, a lot of the things that I've been hearing is stuff like how we as a commission can be better ambassadors within the community and be bringing that information back here and making sure that our citizens really are heard and they really feel like they have a voice. And so I will say that was why one of the things that that I've been hammering on is the issue of where the meetings are. Do people really feel like they're welcome at these meetings? I will also mention a couple of other things that people have brought up. Things like the information for your meetings is less accessible than it is for other boards and commissions. And so if I'm an average citizen and I want to find out what's on the agenda for an MPS meeting, it's harder to find it for you guys than it is for any other board or commission in the city, okay? And you don't follow, for some reason, you guys don't follow the same platform that everybody else does. And so you have to go through a couple of different links, and then you have to sort through, because instead of having the most recent meeting to the oldest meetings, you guys have it from oldest to most recent. So you actually have to scroll through everything else to get to where the meeting is, okay? So even just getting access to the meetings, to the information online. You're the only board or commission that doesn't do live streaming. And so there's all of these little things, so I think, some of it, I would like to see the commission talk about it more broadly of, like, what are some of the things that we could do? Because that was what the takeaway at EDA is, some of these things can be addressed by us being better ambassadors, like getting out there and making sure that people really feel that we're being responsive. And I think that there's so many great things that MPS is doing, but I think that there are some stumbling blocks that leads to, when those problems come up, they're not turning to John or to Heidi or to me or to Rolf. They're going to Facebook, and then they see it and it blows up, and and that's a bad, a black eye for you guys. It's a black eye for the whole city. So I would like to see us talking about it more in those respects too. Some of the changes that you could do there.
I would respectfully disagree with some of that.
Sure.
My thoughts are an experience, because I too, having been on city council, am aware of the threats, the calls, et cetera, et cetera. One of the reasons people go on Facebook is they have anonymity. Another reason, nobody who has been paying their bill and is current is going to start complaining. We need to keep in perspective the actual percentage of dissatisfaction, because most of the public doesn't even know there was a Facebook thread or will be a Facebook thread. It's a limited audience, and I think it's a secure place for those who want to vent, which is great. But in the process, reading through those threads, I do not see them offering any positive solutions, just wanting a platform and an arena to be heard about their complaints, their issues, whatever. And I think we need to keep it in perspective, because, to be honest with you, in my 5 years on the council, MPS had no more than any other area of issues, complaints, or whatever. And I went through some interesting times with construction of different projects and that kind of thing. Snow removal, actually, I think Steve Moore takes a beating in the winter every year. And so I think we need to keep that in perspective. There's always room for improvement, but I do not see the need or cause for a nuclear option here, and as far as, redoing all the customer service and that type of thing. I think we need to look at the fact that those who vent the most or call in or are most unhappy are those who are in crisis at the time. And we need to also keep in perspective, where is the customer accountability? And I agree about as far as making an option with credit cards. If they're not keeping up on utility bills, most likely the credit cards aren't good either. So we leave that wide open. So I think we need to keep it all in perspective and not blow it out of proportion. And I think we need to be aware of that.
And actually, I think we agreed on, or I don't disagree with you on anything. So the one thing I would add, because again, I think it's not a nuclear option as much as, again, finding better ways of being responsive when people have a concern. And I think, as I said, I think that the commission, that should be a big part of what your responsibility is. But I also thought one of the things that I mentioned before that I was a little surprised by, and that it didn't come up in the recommendation, is especially as we're moving to more online billing, why shouldn't we be exploring some sort of just automatic survey, again, where people can give feedback. So again, as we're regularly seeing, if a problem comes up, that we know about it, rather than we wait until there is this, like, people turning to Facebook and saying these stuff. So if everybody, when they pay their bill, they just get a quick, and Rolf knows, we do this at MSUM, they just get a quick bounce back that says, hey, how was our service? And here's your chance to, provide some input. Not only do I think things like that are really beneficial because you might help identify a problem, but it also, again, it would allow you to highlight the really good things. And so this would be something that we could look at and say, look at this person got, top ratings for 5 months in a row. We need to recognize them. And so I think looking for things like that, of, not necessarily throwing out the whole system, but looking at the ways that we can provide better opportunities for people to express their concerns or their affirmation in a productive way, rather than ones that are much more public and not helpful for any of us.
Well, and I can appreciate that idea with the input, but who would be going through it? Do we hire another person merely to read the email responses from the survey, or do we take time out of someone who's already got a loaded schedule? Throwing it out there.
Some of these things are pretty automated. I mean, so if you had a report, I'm just like thinking about closing the questions that, some of the systems that we use at MSUM, like for my survey research stuff, it will generate its own report. So I'm sure, I don't know what platforms they have for things like this, but something like that where every once in a while you just want to run a quick report, and you could even have it sorted by, by the employee and calls. I mean, I'm just assuming something like that, and you could see, and it might help you see, like, oh gosh, this person we seem to have a little.
But
problem.
again, Deb, who does it?
Yeah. Well,
Where does that come under?
right.
Do we throw that on the admin staff?
Yeah.
Where does it go? HR? I don't know.
Well, if it's important, if it's something you value, then I think you find the time. I mean, to me, I don't see this as being something that would.
But we have to look at a business structure as well. They got jobs to do.
Well, don't you do an employee evaluation? I mean, I'm just assuming, isn't that just
In-house
part of-
with HR.
Yeah, but isn't that part of employee evaluation? Like, if you're customer service, if your job is customer service, how would we know if you're doing good customer service if you're never gathering?
But how do we, see, I just find that to be way too subjective, because like I've said, most of the customers, as Nancy rattled off the percentages offhand, you're not going to hear from the ones who, no big deal, the MPS bill came, I pay it.
Right.
You're going to hear from the others. So it's going to be, it's too subjective.
I mean, if there's tools that are just numeric, right? You get your 5-star ratings, and somebody says you get 4 stars or 3.5 stars or whatever it is. I think maybe there's something like that we could look into.
And we are going to look into that next year. Nancy's going to answer, and maybe the same thing I'm going to have. She's going to have more detail than I do on this one. Go ahead, Nancy.
We have been in touch with a couple consultants that do utility surveys, like for the City of Rochester Public Utilities, and there's a couple others, where they do, and they're trying to access a good customer base where they might survey 5,000 of your customers every quarter and try to reach them by phone or email or something, where you get a chance to hear from those customers that are satisfied, get their bill, pay their bills, say thanks for the water, thanks for the electric, and we never hear from them. Those people we're not hearing from. And so there are some consultants out there that will do that. There's a cost to it. And there is an internal staff time to do that, also to take the data and do something with it. But we have been talking with a couple different consultants that would be able to do that. It'd be money in the budget. So I'm thinking that we would be talking about $2,500 or $3,000, each time we did one of these surveys to try to glean that good customer information to put balance to the unhappy ones. Because we do hear from these people. We touch them every month with a utility bill, and a lot of these people don't have money to pay that bill every month. So it's a monthly reminder and a monthly negative interaction with that customer because their financial condition isn't going to change. So this would be an offset to that.
My concern is that we have to be very careful of the questions that we ask. Because in my mind, as I'm listening to the discussion, I'm thinking, okay, satisfaction. Satisfied with what? Garbage collection? Oh, that's right. The people don't separate what we do from garbage collection. And so I think crafting those questions would be extremely important to do that carefully. And that's my sort of hesitation to spending a lot of time, energy, and effort in creating a system or contracting with somebody and paying for that service. So that's just my 2 cents.
But let's see what you find out from Rochester. I mean, that's a close enough utility for us to figure out what they do and see whether it makes sense to use a similar system or something simpler. Make sense?
It makes sense, and we are looking at our processes. In fact, one Facebook stream that went wild. We took a look at our processes, and we ended up talking to Cass County Electric over in Fargo. They said, yeah, we've dealt with that same issue. We no longer charge, for a person's problem inside their home, even though it's difficult to figure out where the problem lies, and of course they want us to come and fix it. The way Cass County does it now, and the way we've adopted it as well, is we really resist sending people out now. But if we do end up sending them out, we don't charge. And that was a big change from what we had done before. And that really is in response to, it's technical systems that we have out there. People generally, do need help. Should more in public service, send 2 guys out for $400, or should we have them call their electrician to see if they can find and fix the problem when we know 99% of the time it's going to be inside the house. So, you do learn from some of these, the comments that we get, it's all experience, right? And the social media is changing the way everybody is looking at how they're going to deliver services, us as well. We're still trying to be as efficient and economical as we can. I talked about that at the council meeting. So we are very efficient. We do excellent customer service. We are live on YouTube as well. So just so you know, right now you're live on YouTube.
Okay, because I've heard a couple of times.
No, we are.
you're not,
So-
and
But
people
I mean, that's
okay.
just, I just wanted to correct that misconception there, but we are. And, generally, we're doing a good job, and we're doing it very economically. Cass County Electric customers would love our rates. XL Energy would love our customer service. Their rates actually are a little bit less than ours. And so, and business customers like the fact that we have processes in place where if they want to expand their business and they need more transformation for their electricity, we have processes, and it's very clear for them to figure out what they need to do, how much they need to pay. Occasionally, a business, and we had one here, and it amplified through the city and through Moorhead Public Service. They signed an agreement saying, here's what we're going to do, here's how much the cost is going to be. Of course, when they got to the end of the project, they're like, wow, look at what the cost, and we got to eat that. And we said, well, it was clearly laid out in the agreement. Well, that doesn't mean they're not going to talk to all kinds of people and see if they can get some, get some of the charges excused. Well, we've got a lot of customers depending on our processes again to make sure that they're not subsidizing, new development. I mean, if we want to do economic development, let's have a process for that and provide that. But it's not, we have our rules and regulations, the commission approves, it's laid out really well, and sometimes people just don't like that. So are we flexible? I think we're flexible as well, but we do have to, we have the rules that we follow, and it's in order to make it equitable for everyone and keep the rates economical. So.
And let's make sure, to your points on the agenda items and the live streaming, let's make sure it's easily accessible, and if we need to flip the...
Because I just pulled it
You
up.
just pulled it up? Okay.
Yep. And I get a little pop-up on my watch and my phone that say it's, they're live right now, so click here. So people can like us on YouTube, and then they can get notifications on their phone that, Moorhead Public Service is having a meeting. I can watch it right on my phone, so.
Is it the audio or is it the video that's not available?
It's
There-
on right now.
There was,
Right, but so-
there was an issue at the last meeting because, I think it was the last meeting, but there was another meeting that was going on live on MCAM. So we're not live on MCAM if there's another meeting that supersedes us,
Okay.
but we're always live on YouTube. So anyone can get us there as long as the MCAM people are here and doing a good job.
Bill, is there something, is it noted on your website, like right on your front page, that where to click to get to the YouTube link?
It's in the agendas, those agendas that are backwards as far as Deb's concerned.
Yeah.
Is it possible though to have a link right there that says?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Click to watch live?
Yep.
Or click to watch? Maybe-
And we're going to look at that too as far as how our website is laid out. So I do appreciate the comments as far as how that goes, because generally people have navigated our website fine. We don't get too many comments on that, but you're commenting, and we already had planned on looking at that a bit more.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So we're live right now.
We're live right now.
Nancy,
You need a comb.
I need a comb, yes. Shine it up. Or a hat. Nancy.
Well, I appreciate the questions. They're all good questions. And, the goal here is to let everybody know that we continue to work on customer service. We can always do a better job. And so we have made some changes in the last 6 months and continue to try to lessen some of that dissatisfaction with our collection process. Basically is where most of that discontent lies, is how we interpret that. So talking about some of those recent customer service changes, so effective in March of this year, no longer disconnecting for city fees. Customers have loved that. Customers don't have to pay their city fees to get turned back on. They love it. We're waiving deposits. We're cutting reconnect fees in 2020 that's included in the proposed budget. We're reducing late fees. Industry average, American Public Power industry average on late fees is 5.67%. We are at 5 currently. We're proposing to go down to 1%, so that will definitely be a benefit to those low-income customers who are the ones that are paying that fee. So we're doing things like that. Some of the other things we're working on some opportunities with the City of Moorhead. We've been emailing with Carla back and forth and trying to resolve some things on lowering late charges, absorbing credit card fees, trying to figure out what we can do with those low-income renters who are in apartments and make their bills more affordable. You know, that's one of the biggest questions we get from that group, that 5,500 group of customers is, why do I pay these city fees? I'm not a property owner. You know, so that's a big one, and that's a question we get posed from the assistance agencies too. Why are these people paying these fees? And that, we normally refer that question to the City of Moorhead too. We continue to collect it, but we do take a lot of questions on that. So a lot of activity going on, constantly changing, trying to evolve processes a little bit. One of the big accomplishments this past year was working through some issues with West Central Minnesota Communities Action, who is the energy assistance provider for our area. So we worked hard on that relationship. We've built it. We're probably the only municipal utility in the state now doing everything 100% correctly with that program. So I would think, we've done a good job on building that relationship. Customers are benefiting from that. It's had some costs, evolve in different areas, but the customers and the low income are definitely seeing the benefits of those changes. And we're open for suggestions.
And also on the reconnect fees, that our costs will go down once we have AMI in, right? Is that the idea? Once we have the automated system in, then the reconnect fees, our costs will go down.
The labor costs, yeah. Well,
you won't be sending a truck out.
Yeah.
All you'll be doing is pushing a button on, pushing a button off. So, yeah, that's the approach we're taking right now. Some utilities actually kept those fees in order to, maybe be a deterrent for not paying your bill and getting into the position where you're disconnected. Or they actually said, the technology of AMI is costing us a lot of money, so, and this is one of the benefits of having it, so we're going to continue to charge that fee. Well, I don't know if that's the best way to go. So we're trying it out this way, and we're actually transitioning it early because of the low-income issues that we've heard about and seen, and call it a pilot. But before we get AMI, we've actually reduced those fees, even though we're still incurring those fees. So other customers are paying those charges for some of those customers because there still is a cost currently for doing that. So, and we've talked about that internally, and Mark Moylanen, who does a great job on all of our customer service and collection, he's at a hockey game for Moorhead High right now, and he talked to a focus group of his hockey dads, and they talked about this issue, and they talked about, okay, well, who's paying that if they're not paying it? Because they had seen the article that Heidi and I did on pro-customer stuff, and they said, so if they're not paying it, am I paying that? And Mark's going like, oh, yeah, you are. Until we get AMI, everyone else out there is paying those costs. So we watch that. We watch that on who's paying for what costs, and we generally like to make sure that whoever's causing the cost is paying the cost. Well, that we're piloting something here. So
there was the issue with a customer we had a couple of weeks ago who was upset about the fee, the $165 fee for sending people out. But that again would have been a fee that everybody else would have to pay for. Now the delivery of the message was maybe another thing too. What are we doing on the customer training side, on the training side for our team?
Well, Nancy mentioned the training that we're looking at doing. Did you, from MRES?
Yeah, that's upcoming this winter, so our construction crews like to have training in the winter when it's too cold or they don't want to be outside, so we do try to schedule that off of construction season. So MRES, Missouri River Energy Services, is going to host and share some costs with us on some fish philosophy customer service training, so we're doing that. We've had training with the village, for our customer service staff who sometimes takes a beating. We have self-care training, we have customer service training, how to get through some of these difficult phone calls and, be empathetic but yet hold that customer accountable for paying the bill. Because we don't have an option on how to help them pay the bill. We can refer to agencies, but the end message that we send is the customer needs to pay the bill. And we will continue customer service training for all MPS employees.
We had a good conversation with West Central Minnesota
Community Action. And we talked about these things and what they do with their staff to kind of relieve some of the stress of people calling all the time and having significant needs. And, I really appreciate Commissioner Regala's comments about supporting staff. And that was the same message that that West Central said as well. They do a lot of things that I think a decade ago we would not do. Buying pizza for the staff, telling them, to get up, walk around, leave the site, or, somebody works through lunch. It's like, no, you don't get to work through lunch. You have to go to lunch, get away for a little while. Those types of things that, I think we need to support staff, and we need to figure out creatively how to make sure that we're helping them relieve the stress that dealing with the onslaught of customer after customer after customer causes. And Mark Moylan and Nancy do an excellent job of supervising that. Mark takes a lot of the second level calls, and he does an excellent job.
Yeah, I'm always surprised that 17.8% of our customers are delinquent, right? That's a big number. That's not a small amount, and we can't give up we haven't incurred the cost. So, like you said, at some point, and you just said as well, at some point somebody has to pay the bill. Somehow.
Yeah, and at the council meeting when I was answering these questions, I I mentioned, and Commissioner Regala mentioned that as well. You're welcome to come and sit by our customer accounts staff. They're all out in the open. Mark is right there listening to everything that's going on. He's getting the next level call up. And, they do an excellent job, and it's a tough job. And, yeah, you're welcome to come and watch. It's eye-opening. And, I'm walking by, Nancy's walking by, and you often hear the conversations that are going on. And our staff is being held accountable because we can hear them, talking through all of, all these conversations. So, they're from here to Christine away, and they're talking on the phone with customers, and, they're doing an excellent job with some difficult customers.
One other item we had talked about earlier at a commission meeting was recording phone calls, so recording those customer service phone calls. We've done some research on that. We've worked with the city attorney on a couple questions on it, and right now we're coming down to some issues on Minnesota public records information. So the utility information, the electric utility information is non-public information, so we have to protect that information. We can't release it. So we're looking at right now whether it is worth it to record those calls because of the protections that we have to do, and on Minnesota data privacy and records retention, how long we would have to retain that information. So kind of run into a roadblock there where we've got to make some decisions based on, availability for open records and retention. So it's a tough decision for us whether we go forward with that or not. For training purposes, yeah, it'd be great to have it there. Like Bill said, we hear a lot of the conversation that goes on. So maybe not terribly important for training, to be able to listen to both sides of a conversation that happens. It'd be great. But there's going to be some pros and cons on doing that recording. And so we haven't finalized any process on that yet due to the open records and the data privacy and records retention.
And one thing that Nancy is talking about is the length of the message before anybody answers the phone. It's incredible how long the script is right now before answering the phone. And that's unworkable, I think, right now.
It's probably about 35 to 40 seconds of disclosures to the customer of every call that comes in that they'd have to listen through before they could, and basically say, yeah, I know I'm being recorded. And
So if we had a system like this to record it, we would have to give the customer 35 to 40 seconds of information warning beforehand that your call's going to be recorded.
yes.
Wow. That's lovely.
And we're working with the city attorney's office on that. Mm-hmm. And Nancy's done a good job kind of going around and around, back and forth a number of times to say, are we sure we got to say this? I mean, there was a couple of statements that we said, come on, we shouldn't have to. I mean, we're saying this twice. So we've gone through it, but it's still, I thought it was more like 21 seconds was still long, but it might be longer than that. It's a long time. So if you call more public service, first thing is you got to wait 21 seconds before, or 35 seconds or whatever, before you even get to talk to someone. So.
And obviously they're legally required disclosures.
That's what we're working with the city
Right.
attorney's office on.
Okay.
If we record it, we have to store it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Just when do you anticipate bringing that information to the commission for decision? Are we a month, 6 months? Any idea at all?
Probably January we could. I mean,
Okay.
right now we're just trying to minimize that disclosure as much as we can, and then we could bring that for a decision.
Okay. So that disclosure has to be approved through the city attorney or through the state?
The city attorney is working with us on that, so.
Okay, all right.
And we have tested some systems out, right? We have had some systems running from a recording perspective, from a technical perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, IT's got it.
So we have some experience on that side.
Yep.
Okay. Well, is anybody willing to make a motion to accept the report on the strategic direction for customer service?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any more discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 9. This is a motion. This is an item that had been tabled in our last meeting. So the first thing we would need to do is a motion to take it from the table if it is your pleasure to discuss the item. This is about approved auditing services with I. Bailey. We tabled that in the last meeting because the city is in the process of an RFP, I assume, for their services, and there was an issue on whether or not we would double up services if we stayed with IDE and the city used their own firm, or whether we should go and continue what we've done in the past, have 2 audits but with the same firm. So anyway, first thing, if you wanted to discuss the item, would be to have a motion to take it off the table.
I'll make motion to take that item off the table and discuss further.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we have,
Commissioner Ralph,
yeah, sorry.
can I ask that we invite the city's
CFO?
thank you to the table?
Absolutely, please.
Thank you.
So it would be helpful to get the background, and Nancy, you have background as well, right? The 2 of you. So in our last meeting, there was a discussion that, as I just mentioned, that if we currently do 2 audits, and somebody correct me, we do 2 audits, right? One for us, one for the city, but we're using the same firm. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when we do those 2 audits, do the auditors who do those audits, do they talk to one another and just transfer data and say our part is right and their part is right, or how does that work?
They're the same firm, so the information from our audit is taken and incorporated into the city's audit.
Okay. And there's no fee charged for that, right? So we each pay for our audit. Sorry, Carl.
No, that's correct. We each are billed for the individual audits. It is the same, again, like you said, it was the same firm that's currently doing the audit. So they are able to provide that information to us, the city is required to put the MPS financial statements into our CAFR, our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, so as a component unit, which they are. You guys are a unit of the government. So they then provide those financial statements to our office, and we incorporate those into our CAFR.
Okay. So now the city is you guys going to have an RFP out. Have you selected a new audit firm yet, or is that still out?
The RFP has been done. It was actually finalized a while back. I gave the responses to all the proposals, a copy of it to both Nancy and Bill. We have made our selection for Clifton, Larson, and Allen to do our audit for the next 5 years, or 3, and then an option to renew for 2 additional years, 1 year at a time at that point. But for 3, and then option to renew for 2 more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Would you mind identifying yourself? That was rude
yes,
of me.
Carla,
it's my first meeting,
yeah,
so
Carla McCall. I'm the finance officer or finance director for the City of Moorhead.
Thanks for being here. So you have selected Clifton, and I understand that the RFP was for both pieces originally, right?
Yes, I was asked if I would incorporate in the RFP a separate section to be identified separately for the cost to do an audit for MPS. I asked Nancy if she wanted me to include that in the RFP so that we could have that also for you folks to be able to look at and identify whether, and it was a separate item, separate from what the costs were shown for the city audit, a separate item for the MPS audit.
So is that from a financial perspective, is it a better cost for us, or was it the same cost, or do we know?
There's a savings for a 5-year savings of $7,725 versus what the Eide Bailey proposal was for that same period. So there would be a savings going with the Clifton Larson Allen proposal for MPS and for the city as well.
Mm-hmm. And would we have any cost transferring all the information over to Clifton Larson?
No, there's no cost. They have already in the process of getting the cities. They already are making that connection with Eide Bailey today as we speak to get the information from the city's prior audit. They talk to the prior auditor. There's no cost. That's all part of what they do. Yeah.
Now, if for some reason we decide to stick with the current audit firm with Eide, would there be additional cost? I mean, there's savings that you mentioned. Would there be additional costs if there were 2 firms doing the different audits?
There won't be a monetary cost that I am aware of, but there's definitely going to be a cost to staff time because you're going to have your books available to 2 auditing firms because you do the city's collections of all of our utilities, which is sewer and stormwater and sanitation, all that. So they will have to come and interrupt your working environment, and they will audit those books on behalf of the city. So you're going to have Clifton Larson Allen folks in there anyway because they have to see that you guys are collecting on behalf of the city properly. So you're going to have them there. So in this case, you would have 2 auditing firms. You have Eide Bailey coming and doing an audit and Clifton Larson Allen doing an audit. So you're going to have double the auditors because they can't just not audit the other utilities that the city provides. So you will have to have your books available twice.
John, do you have questions?
A couple here. So you're not referencing that they're going to tire all the financials. You're just saying that they're going to audit the collection practices of the fees.
And yes, and the collection and how you send that to the city, and so the numbers are going to be in there. The dollars will be looked at.
But again, you're not talking about they're not going to be auditing the financial numbers. They're just auditing the collection practice.
If they're separate auditors, yes, they would be doing the collection processes and looking also at receivable balances and multiple other things that are involved. They won't be looking at the full financial statement and auditing that. No, they will not do that.
Okay. Can you give us a little background of this auditing firm as far as where they're from, what their history is, how many of the utilities they've audited in the past, just some general information of who these people are?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to do that. I didn't realize, I mean, the information had been provided to your management team, and I assume that they've done their due diligence in looking at all the audit firms and elected to stay with Eide Bailey, so I don't have the proposal with me tonight.
Okay. Do we have anybody here that knows anything about this audit company? Nancy?
When Controller Mark Moylanen and I reviewed the RFPs, Eide Bailey and Clifton Larson Allen were the two that we would be most interested in. And as we looked at the MPS numbers alone, so both are qualified to do that. I've had a conversation with their lead person. I think they're capable of doing a utility audit. I don't think that's any problem. As we looked at the pricing, though, as we looked at the pricing for the city, separate from the pricing for MPS, Eide Bailey's pricing for MPS is lower than Clifton Larson Allen. So if we looked at the financial statement audit and Clifton Larson Allen's all-inclusive price, Eide Bailey is still a better choice for us. $15,500 for Clifton Larson Allen compared to $13,800 for Eide Bailey for audit year 2019.
So
I'm going to have to disagree with those numbers. I just want to make sure you know that that's not the case.
Well, I'll bring that back to us here. Okay. So where is this company out of?
Well, I think they've got offices in in a number of places. I just looked it up online. They don't have any offices in North Dakota, but in Minnesota they're out of Albert Lee, Alexandria, Austin, Brainerd, Buffalo, Mankato, Medina, Minneapolis, New Ulm, Owatonna, Rochester, St. Cloud, Waseca.
So it's a fairly large audit.
Minnesota, yeah, Minnesota.
Okay, so I am confused as far as why we have our two chief financial people here and you can't agree on the numbers.
Me either. I mean, I've got the numbers right here that I took right off the audit proposals, and I guess I'm not understanding where she said Eide Bailey. Eide Bailey said for the 2019 audit it would be $13,800. CLA audit was $12,000, so there was a difference of $1,800 there. For the single audit, Eide Bailey said $3,000, CLA said $3,500, so there's a little higher fee there, but the total is a savings of $1,300 from Eide Bailey to CLA. So the proposal that the city received, these are the numbers. Unless you guys went back out to Eide Bailey and asked for a separate proposal, that I can't tell you because, and the numbers here is what came right off of those proposals. So I don't know where they're coming from. So.
There were three numbers in the CLA proposal. There was a basic financial statement audit, there was uniform guidance audits, and then there was drafting financial statements. And there's three items. I used two of those items. So I used the basic financial statements, and I used the drafting of the financial statements to come to a total of $15,500. MPS is not doing a uniform guidance audit this year, and normally we don't, so I didn't include those figures. So Clifton, or CLA, totals $15,500 with the draft financial statement. Eide Bailey is at $13,800.
Okay, and I think I understand the discrepancy there is because I made an assumption that you draft your own financial statements and that they just audit them. I did not know that the auditors were actually drafting your financial statements. My assumption was that you were doing those in-house and that they were simply auditing. So back to an earlier question, your auditors are actually drafting your financials as well as auditing them, and so that's the difference there. My assumption was that you had staff in-house to actually prepare your financial statements and that they were simply auditing them.
So whose numbers is accurate?
It would be Nancy at that point, because I did not realize that you are not drafting your own financials.
Well, go ahead.
My question is, where's the communication that we aren't aware of what each other are doing in terms of financial records and drafting and whatnot. It took until a conversation right here, right now, for the city to realize a pretty big factor of your auditing process and in your financial reporting. For me that seems concerning, alarming, that there's that big of a communication gap. Second question, or a question for you, Carla, is, at the city we were told that it's a good thing to change up your auditing every so often, your auditing company every so often. Can you speak to that and where you get that information from?
Okay, good. Okay. There's what's called a Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, which is for the U.S. and Canada, and I'm a member of the GFOA. They have multiple best practices on performing nationally, how you should be working with your auditors, and the best practice is that auditors should be changed every 5 to 7 years. That's a best practice. There's arguments that if there's a prolonged use of one auditor, that they become complacent and they slack in their role for testing data and procedures. And there could be, in fact, maybe not in fact, but in appearance, that the independence of that auditor is lost over that many years, that they just assume that they understand and know how everything's being done, and so they don't come in again with fresh eyes and ask more in-depth questions because they are so comfortable auditing after that many years. That is exactly why I have asked to get a new auditor in for the City of Moorhead, because we have had Eide Bailey also for over 20 years. You get different auditors, but you still have the same firm, so their ideals, their methodologies, their questions, everything is different there. So the reason why we say we should switch auditors periodically is just that. It's a best practice in the world of government finance.
Now I'm going to try to choose my words delicately. I find it very frustrating that we are having staff people with assumptions that are telling the council things based on assumptions, which is, in my opinion, inappropriate. I would hope that our staff would have had this information discussed and thoroughly understood before we're having a second meeting here, and I spoke to Deb yesterday at the EDA meeting to see if this has been resolved, and apparently it has not been. And I find it very concerning that our two financial people have so much differences in their information that they're giving us today. Since we are the commission, my sense would be we rely on our staff to give us the accurate information versus an assumption that we're getting from the city. I don't know what or how we should proceed at this point, because I still don't know if there's an understanding of exactly what we're doing. The statement about Eide Bailey, I'm not sure how long you have been in the Fargo-Moorhead area and how familiar you are with this firm. My experience with them is over 30 years. And that's on all kinds of audits that's been received. And I've never heard any of that commentary about this firm, about the quality of the work, any concerns about being in an environment that they don't go into detailed audits, because you have different people, and the firm is local and very well known about the quality. So the statement about it should be done because it's best practices, you can argue that all the way all day long and not come to a conclusion here for it. So I don't know how this is going to be resolved, but we got to get our numbers together and make a decision, because this has been delayed a month now because we can't get accurate information.
I would like to entertain a motion to table this again, get Dave in here, but I would like to take it under advisement. Too much information coming at us, and with Carla's thoughts, and I would like to do that. I would make a motion.
I'm wondering why it is that we're reluctant to take action on this. So I don't know that we disagree. I'm just in a position where I'm thinking, what's one more meeting going to do? Yes, we add Dave and 2 weeks, but I'm not sure what the next step is, other than to say, let's go with I-Bailey. Do we need any kind of, we do need to have, oh, okay. Do we need to have the city give us their blessing? I mean, to me, we've done due diligence, and I say we resolve it and move on.
I wanted to go back to John's comment, because I'm new to this, okay? But I have to say, just looking at it, it seemed like there was a lack of communication from the very beginning. And well, first of all, I want to go back to what Carla was saying, because I can tell you in everything that my communications with Carla, I've never heard her say anything disparaging about I-Bailey. It was talking about her professional understanding of best practices, okay? So, but I will also, in defense of the city staff, when I've read through the communication, there was an effort to work collaboratively with MPS. And the email was very clear. It wasn't this top-down. It was, let's work together, let's find one. And for whatever reason, that offer was rejected. And then when we brought this at the last meeting, I guess, my colleague and I asked her about this too, because my understanding after that was that the staff would get together and have a conversation to work that out. I assumed that was going to happen between, sometime after that last meeting, that the people that are in the know about these would get together and talk about these things. And I was really surprised. So when John and I started talking yesterday, I was going through stuff in the packet, that it was clear from looking at the information in the packet that didn't happen. And so I checked with the city manager, and I asked her to check with Carla to see, did anybody from MPS contact you? To see, hey, let's work this out. Let's communicate about this and sit down and figure out a solution. And my understanding from looking at the meeting packet was that you went back to the auditors, but there was no communication with the city staff. And so we've got to be working together on these things. And so that alone is a good reason to table it, because in terms of due diligence, I would say part of that due diligence would be, if there is a disagreement about these things, then they should be talking about it and bringing back that information to the commission.
Let me ask a question. When you said, so two things. First of all, you said the offer was rejected, and I don't think that is the case. I think we looked at the auditing firms, and then the decision on NPS's side was not to change auditors. So there was no offer rejected, right? I mean, is that correct? Or am I making this up?
That's not what the email.
No. I mean, you said the offer was rejected. So did we participate with the city in the process?
Yes, we participated in the process. Carla did a good job of putting out the RFP. She clearly made MPS, the commission, a separate part of that RFP. And then when the RFP information came back in, she sent me copies of it. We reviewed our information. We looked at costs. To us, I-Bailey was not the lowest cost, but the next lowest cost for MPS. I think CLA does an even better job at lowering the cost for the city. So if you look at the two independently, I-Bailey is lower than Clifton CLA for us, And for the city, CLA is cheaper than Eide Bailey. So I think it's a good combination to have the two separate auditors. I think we get the best financial deal out of that.
So then the next question is, so was there any communication between the two entities in the last 2 weeks on this issue?
I haven't had any communications with Chris Volkers on this.
Carla hasn't. Carla,
I have
right?
not any communication with Nancy on this.
So,
I had asked one of the council representatives to forward me the email regarding the 12 to 15,000 duplication of services. I thought they were going to go back to Chris Volkers and ask her to forward that to me. I haven't received that yet.
No, what we said was, you guys have to talk to each other. Yeah, that was, we both, because I checked with Heidi to see if that was my understanding of it, is that it's not, my position to pass on somebody's email, but just to have you communicate with each other.
Now, to go back to the issue at hand, it's selecting auditors for the commission. The city is going to select their own auditor. The issue about more public service and the city working together, we can maybe hire a consultant to do work on that. But as far as the audit goes, I mean, an audit is an important function of the board of directors of each entity. Like Nancy mentioned, they can be done separately. As Carla mentioned, in the RFP, they can be done separately. The costs are cheaper for us to go with Eide Bailey, the local firm, and the city to go to CLA, the non-local firm, which I think is a big deal. Changing auditors is my second point. Many people are on board of directors. They do audits all the time. I'm on the board of directors at Missouri River Energy Services. We changed auditors last year. I explained that at the last meeting. It did not go well. There is a risk in changing auditors. Me personally, if you're satisfied with Eide Bailey as the board of directors here, I'm comfortable with Eide Bailey, and that would be my recommendation. Changing auditors, again, I think is a risk. Next, item number 3, Eide Bailey is the local firm. We have residents in Moorhead that work at Eide Bailey. There's residents in Fargo that work at Eide Bailey. I think that should be a consideration for the commission and the council on what auditor they select. My point number 4 was the separate audits. We both have our own financials. It's very clear that we can do separate audits, and we do separate audits. Ours has to be folded into the cities. That is done. These auditing firms work together all the time. That can be easily done. We don't have to do the audit together. The costs, again, that's my 5th point, the costs are lower for us and lower for the city to go with the separate auditors. But the costs are not the biggest factor. Who are you comfortable with is one of the factors. I mean, the auditor will come to this board and say, we've taken a look at all the financials, we worked with your staff was very cooperative, your staff has signed the management agreement saying that everything is factual, everything is right, we've checked everything over, everything looks good. That's what your auditor is going to do. Both of these firms are good firms. I mean, I don't see why there would be a reason for Moorhead Public Service Commission to change auditors. But it's up to the board.
Carly, if you would just, for clarification here, and I apologize for getting frustrated and probably taking it out of you. I'll start with there because I was hoping that this would be resolved. But based on what Nancy had shared with us and what you had shared with us, are you both have the same now understanding of what it's going to cost based on your new information that you were given tonight? Or aren't you in a position to answer that?
I believe with the information I was provided tonight, I could verify and it would probably match what is being suggested.
Okay.
Because I did not know you did not need a single audit. That was something we hadn't discussed, and I did not realize that financial reports were also being written by the auditing firm.
All right, okay.
So
it's, you did not have sufficient information to come up with the same conclusion that we were being given here today, then?
I would say that's a fair statement.
Is that a fair
yes.
statement? Well, again, we've beaten this that we are here together as a city and the utility. We need to stress to staff that we here have to collaborate together and work for the best interest of the citizens and the users, and certainly encourage you to continue working towards that end. Heidi, please.
Thank you. I guess I'm going to I'm going to be maybe brutally honest here. The pushback that we're getting from MPS regarding changing an auditor, it seems suspicious. It seems like there's something that, what is up with the push? If the cost isn't a big deal.
Heidi, this is now it's getting to a point where are you?
I'm not accusing anybody of any. No, I am not
insinuating that we have an ulterior motive not to change auditors, because that's what it sounded like, Heidi.
All I'm saying is, why would we not want a fresh pair of eyes to come in and give us a different perspective, is all I'm saying. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I don't think there would be anything.
You said suspicious. Suspicious is not a word of not accusing. I'm sorry. I mean, if you were
at home watching this as a citizen, would it not be? Wouldn't you wonder why is this such a big deal? Why don't they want, why can't we agree on a different set of eyes? Because honestly, I have heard that.
So you're doing two things right now. First of all, you're saying that Eid Bailey would not be doing their job. And as a member of a profession myself,
you put words in my mouth, because I never said anything about Eid Bailey.
Yes, we are. We are saying that that the eyes of Eid Bailey would not give us the correct information. That's what we're saying.
I'm not saying that, Ralph. I'm not saying that
Why
they
would you
are
change
not
auditors?
reputable and that they wouldn't give us the right information.
Okay.
I'm talking about perception. I'm talking about what it looks like. And the city was aware of that. That's why we changed. That's why we went with a different auditor.
Okay. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all I'm going to say.
I'll make a motion.
Please.
To approve the item number 9 as presented by staff to accept Eid Bailey as our auditor.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I have a second.
Any more discussion?
I
Sorry, Deb.
I will add, I am going to have to vote no aye on this because I need to think this whole picture over. There was an influx of new information with all these numbers, and I need to process a little.
Deb.
And I don't, this is kind of going back to something that you mentioned and why I use the term of rejected. Because I do think it's important to, in my mind, to illustrate where some of the problems started. And again, getting at the communication piece. Because as I mentioned, when I read through the email, and a lot of this, as I said, is new to me, it wasn't as if, when you read through the email communication, it wasn't as if MPS was deciding to not work with the city because it wanted to go with Eid Bailey. At least when you read the email, it's because at that point we hadn't picked anybody. We hadn't picked who we were going to go with, and the request to MPS was, here's the pool we have right now. We'd like you to, could you narrow it down to who you think are your top 2 choices? Eid Bailey could have been in that. I mean, but I guess I still just don't understand why at that point the response was, no, we're going to go our own way. And so that's, to me, why some of us are kind of perplexed by this, why, was it a miscommunication, or like, why was it that at that point we were trying to work with MPS, the staff, city staff was trying to work with MPS to do this together so that it was efficient, and it seems like if they had been working together and communicating, a lot of this would have gotten worked out, but instead at that point, the response that we got was, no, we don't want to work with you. And so I guess I'm just still really kind of stuck on that of, to me, that's sort of where all the problems started, and there wasn't good communication back then, which, and I'm not, I'm saying, to go back to what Heidi was mentioning, I think it's sometimes things like that that lead to mistrust, because we're wondering, here it is, from the city's point of view, the city staff is offering to work together, to work collaboratively, and that was turned down, and so it just, people are left wondering, and they're going to try to fill in the blanks, and so.
Well, they're definitely going to fill in the blanks after this meeting. Chris, do you mind if I step in for a second?
Please.
So when you say we were not cooperating, so Nancy, when the RFP proposals came back, did we look at them and communicate with the city whether or not we had looked at them? Because you mentioned we had looked at Clifton Larson and Ide Bailey, and they came in one or two. So it sounds like, from what Deb has heard, that we didn't even cooperate with the city. Did we look at the stuff?
We looked at it, but then at that point, we communicated with Carla that we were going to approve our own auditing services.
Yeah.
I didn't communicate back the two that we were looking at.
Okay, so we had looked at them.
We looked
but
at
we
all
did
of
not
them.
communicate
Yes.
that back.
Correct.
So
We did not
definitely
communicate our choices back.
Right, so it wasn't as if you said, well, we really want Ide Bailey, and, and this is why, and if
Yep.
we could, if you're doing Ide Bailey, we could work together. It was, we don't want to work with you.
Yep.
And that's what seems really strange. I mean,
Well, I mean, we
know.
did work with you, and the working together actually saved some money, and we're diversifying our audits. So, I mean, we're getting half of what you're arguing that we should get. The city is going to have a different auditor. More Public Service is going to stay with the same one. We may learn from yours. You may learn from ours. It might even make Ide Bailey step it up a little bit and look at things closer, I guess. But working together, which Nancy and Carla have been doing for a number of months, got a cost savings. It didn't maybe turn out the way anybody thought, but you're getting a lower cost, where if we go with CLA or whatever their name is, our costs go up. But if we stay with Ide Bailey, our costs go down because of the way the RFPs were done. And, Carla did the RFPs, as Nancy said, yeah, make us separate. So, and we can have separate audits. There's not a problem with separate audits. The books are separate anyway.
and I'm still not even sure about the cost saving, because so you said, if, based on the numbers, if we had both gone with the same agency, there was a cost saving, right? If they'd gone with Ide Bailey and we had gone with Ide Bailey, the numbers that you're comparing. But now that we're doing separate ones, as you said, there is some added cost in terms of staffing and things like that. And so that cost saving was based on if we both did Ide Bailey or we both. So when Carla answered John's questions, that would have been based on a cost saving if we had been with the same firm. Okay, but now that we're not, I just want to make sure if I'm understanding that correctly. And so now that they're not.
But again, I think Carla had said that she did not have all the information to make an analysis to that here. So without having that ability to do that analysis here, the last month's statement about an $8,000 to $12,000 higher cost to the utility or the city she didn't have the information, all the information necessary to make that calculation. Mm-hmm. If I'm understanding here now, with what we talked about earlier, is that with that information and clarification of what is going to be included in the encompass of the audit, that the utility will have a savings, the city will have a savings. It has been kind of sticking her in the middle of a discussion with not all the information, but that's what I believe that we can go forward with comfortably, that based on the change of what her understanding of what the audit will encompass, that it would be a savings for the utility.
And that's what I want to confirm with Carla, because when you asked that question, and Carla then adjusted the figures based on the new information, she's adjusting to say, if she had looked at I-Bailey, and see whatever, CLA, that now it would be less expensive for MPS to use I-Bailey, okay? However, overall, if we're still looking at it, I don't know, because now there is added cost from doing two separate ones, and that was part of what we were trying to bring to the table, is that in terms of staffing and things like that. And so will that still mean an overall, because since we all are, even, the overall cost of the city and MPS, does that mean that overall it's more expensive if you're doing two separate?
My only comment would be, I don't know how to put into financial numbers. I think you're saying there's a dollar savings, but then there's going to be a cost to interrupt your processes twice. Instead of having one auditing firm in there that can do both audits at the same time, ask the questions, get all the data, go back and look at it and be done, you're going to have to do that 2 times. And I don't know how you put a number to that disruption and that extra time of staff having to do this twice for 2 different auditors, which that's up to you. All I can say is that it has worked in the past for many, many years, that we've had the same auditing firm, and that has been good for the city, so that we didn't have to worry about one auditing firm coming back in and looking and asking for something different that the first one doesn't. And I would probably guarantee that CLA is going to ask for some things that I-Bailey has not been asking for in the past, a little more in depth probably, based on my recommendations. Only because when I tried to get accounts receivable information from I-Bailey this past year, the 2018 audit, it was unavailable by MPS. MPS is not tracking accounts receivable separately, so we can't determine what our balances are as far as the separate utilities that, I don't know if I understand it's a computer issue, but it still is something that needs to be somehow reconciled. So we had to use an estimate to try to back into what we think our accounts receivable balances are, because MPS wasn't able to do that. So there's some things that I have already seen that I would just like to get confirmed. And so CLA or I-Bailey or any of the auditors all have very good abilities. I have no problems with any of them. I know they all could do the audit. It was simply a fresh set of eyes to look and make sure that everything is being asked that we need asked, and that's very standard in government for you to see a change. In fact, our customers go to their customers. The auditing firms just say, "Oh yeah, we won't get you guys this next 5 years, but you'll come back after 5 years, and it'll be this." So they all rotate. All the cities rotate around to the different auditing firms for that purpose. So this is not an unusual request to ask for a new auditing firm. My understanding, if I'm getting this right, is the biggest reason why you want to stay with I-Bailey is because they are local. They're a North Dakota company, but they're in the local area, and that there is a slight reduction in cost. Those are the main reasons you want to stay with them. You're not identifying any other. I'm not sure what the risk would be to go to a different auditing firm. I'm not sure I understood that comment. There's not a financial risk. It's just a risk that they might come up with different information. I don't know what the risk is to have an auditing firm who's very capable come in and do an audit. So I have suggested and recommended an audit change for the city of Moorhead, and I would just have hoped that MPS would have understood the reasoning behind that and selected to do the same and stick with the same firm to keep the disruption as far as having 2 auditors. But it's definitely your choice as a commission. So
we will work with both auditors, and Nancy was talking about how professional both of them answered all of her questions. And as far as the extra costs, it sounds like it's extra cost to Moorhead Public Service in order to work with 2 auditors on some specific account issues that the city may have. And there won't be any actual cost increases because the employees that are going to be working on the audit are salaried employees, and they're going to just be putting in the extra time. And we'll monitor that time, and we'll give you a report after it's done.
Thank you. Any more discussion? So the question on the table is to approve auditing services with Ide Bailey. We have a motion. We have a second. So I call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. Item number 10, that's the item we added as a new business. This is approve agreement with Ames Construction for the transmission line relocation services. Who's going to talk about that?
I think Travis will start on this one.
Yep. Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. I'll give you a little background on the recommendation for tonight. It's to approve an agreement with Ames Construction, Inc. For 115 transmission line relocation services. The history on this, back in 2016, we started the design process of relocating the 115 transmission line in the area of the 2020 First Street grade separation project. In 2017, we worked with city staff and their consultant to come up with the best route available to relocate this line so that we could be out of the way during the construction of the 115 or the grade separation project. That construction started in August of 2018 and was completed roughly in October, November of 2018. Excuse me. The issue at hand and why we're looking for this agreement tonight, in October of 2018, while we were still working on the line construction, Ames was also working on some of the construction for the grade separation project. What occurred at that point in time is our poles were in place, however we did not have the lines on them yet. They were doing some over excavation for a retaining wall and unfortunately made the pole that was already in place unstable. We were required to, we were requested to relocate that with Ames at that point in time so that we could finish getting the line up and operational and they could continue working on their retaining walls that they needed. That structure itself, which is structure number 12, was put back into its original place in a few weeks ago in November. And at about that similar time, we were having issues with slope stability on structure number 9. This is a little different structure than structure number 12. This has a concrete foundation on it. It's called a running or an inline. It's not an inline structure, but it's a running corner. And what happens with that? What's happening with that structure is it is falling in with the slope stability issues. Ames again has requested Warren Public Service to relocate that structure to a new location further north than its current location temporarily until they can offload the weight of the structure or the weight of the slope. They can complete their construction and then they're going to backfill everything in. The meeting that occurred yesterday for this was with Ames Construction. They have requested us to invoice them the costs for those structure relocations. The other part of that too is back when we were starting this project, we did obtain easements from the property owners on this route so that we had an easement that was available for our structures to be in. And one of the reasons why we're looking to finalize an agreement with them to pay for the reimbursement costs of relocating those lines. We've paid for them once already with the project. The project is complete, and now we're having to relocate or relocated last year, finalizing just a few weeks ago for this. So that we're looking to do that. John has drafted a draft agreement, which I have put in front of you. You can also see that there's you can see the structure location route as well in the maps, and the easements that we have obtained as well too.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I could make one comment. I did draft it this afternoon, and I found out after I drafted it that it was structure 9, not structure 10, and I thought I'd requested my assistant to make the change throughout, but I see that there are some references to structure 10 that are in error. They should all be references to structure 9. So if you do approve this, we will change those references.
Yeah, the recommendation is to approve staff and our general manager, Bill Schwant, and staff to finalize the agreement contingent upon final legal approval.
Yep.
Ms. Travis, there is no commentary or whatever potential cost is going to be involved in this.
Correct.
So what is Ames actually agreeing to pay?
Well, I can give you an estimate on what structure 12 has cost us.
Okay.
We are still working through the design process and figuring out what the cost of materials and lining up a contractor to do the work is. Those are not done yet. The structure 12 cost was probably in the range of $25,000. That was just the change order alone to relocate everything. There's still some engineering costs as part of that. I don't have anything yet on the relocation of the structure 9.
John, maybe you can make clarification here. I haven't had a chance to read this. Is there a item that says they're responsible for the costs and they'll be reimbursing us for that?
Yes, in both for section or structure 12 and structure 9, it reads, Ames will be responsible for the cost of all materials, construction, administration, and professional fees incurred by MPS in accommodating the relocation.
And Ames would also be responsible for removing the concrete pier that's currently in place, because that structure will have to be put back pretty much in the same exact location once everything's back in place.
And Ames has agreed to this
So
verbally.
If it's my understanding that this is the result of the water break that they caused, is that correct? Or not?
There was slope stability issues prior to that water break, or actually the slope failure. In my perspective, the slope failure is what caused the water main separation. So the failing slope there was a prior root cause to the issue of the pipe separation.
So then it would be your recommendation not to have something in this document saying that they're responsible for that expense and cost of the utility as well?
Are you talking for the water main side?
Yes.
No, that's going to be handled under, that's part of the city's contract with Ames, because the water mains were replaced with that contract. This is just separate because we have easements in place, and they've told us to send them the invoices.
Is that everybody's understanding?
Yeah, that was part of the 1.4 million we paid on that project. It was separate.
No. The 1 million gallons of water that was
Yeah.
So
You
that
want
is.
to answer that?
I can. I guess what's your question?
Well, I just want to make sure if we have covered our bases to ensure that this cost is covered by the contractor, and then there's another agreement that's in place to recover the costs associated with the water break.
Yeah. We didn't have we didn't have a ton of cost into the water main separation, aside from the water itself. The bigger issue is the disruption to the service, i.e., Travis I don't think Travis touched on much, but what they're going to have to do likely, and it's still pending, is relocate both the finished water line and the raw water line that are both there. Right now, the finished water line is off as a result of the separation. So the cost presumably would be under the city's contract. We have some other provisions in there without diving into the weeds.
Okay. Right.
But presumably those costs will lie within the city's contract.
Great. Thank you.
Any more discussion? I would entertain a motion to approve the agreement.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. I think that was it for today, right?
Yep.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're done. Thank you very much.
We're kidding about.
Two.